Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Fergus Rooney. He is the co-founder of AgencyEA. Fergus, how are you doing today?
Good, Logan. Thanks for having us. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Just got done with a great holiday. It's right after Christmas at the time we're recording this. So thank you for asking, and thank you again for joining us today. We're going to be talking about 5 questions to ask yourself to avoid experiential pitfalls when you're designing experiences for your brand. Before we jump right into that, Fergus, I think it would be great background to share with us a little bit of your backstory and what you and the team at AgencyEA are up to these days.
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks, Logan. AgencyEA is a full-service brand experience agency. So what that really means is that we specialize in event and experiential marketing. So working with big brands to unite them with their target audiences. And we typically do that through use of live experiences, digital engagements, and we couple that with traditional marketing. So basically, we're looking at events in the experiential event space and ways to bring our brand partners' messages to life for their audiences. I think we have a team here in Chicago. We're based in Chicago in River North area, and we have a team of 130 plus experiential professionals working across all disciplines of event marketing, experiential marketing, from space design to graphic design to creative messaging, obviously production as well, all of those efforts. So really happy to be with you. Thanks for having us.
Awesome stuff, Fergus. Thanks for that background. Yeah, it sounds like you guys are up to some awesome things over there at AgencyEA and have a very talented team. So we're going to be talking about these 5 questions to ask yourself when thinking about the experiential marketing efforts that you're trying to execute on. And I know the first one you wanted to talk about is, could this be the wrong project for the right client? Where have you seen that before, and why is that question important?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot. Clients get really buzzed about, there's so much experiential marketing that happens out there that clients see other people doing things in the promotional space, and they just feel like that would be really cool if I was to do that too. So if you have, basically a more traditional client who's trying to operate in a very digital space when that's not really connected to their brand at all, then that can be actually confusing for their audience, and it can cause more questions than answers, if you like. So, you could look at it in terms of, what is your audience? What is it that they want to do with you? How is it that they connect to your brand? So, if your audience is very low tech and you're feeding them high tech of ways of accessing you, then that's really not going to connect with them, because if they don't know how to video chat, then why would you be talking to them about augmented reality? That would make no sense.
Right.
So you need to be very, very, very careful to make those connections with the audience in ways that they expect you to, and then to amplify those. And I think you don't need to do too much. It just needs to be in the right kind of channels where they expect to see you. And, they're gratified to see you there as opposed to surprise. And surprises can be bad sometimes,
Right. Surprise and delight is good, but you want it to be a good surprise, and you want to meet your audience where they are. I think that's great advice. The next question is, what's the worst that could happen? So why is it important? I guess where you're going here is think through the worst case scenario in this experience or this event execution, and trying to plan for the worst. Is that kind of the angle here with this question, Fergus?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think everybody wants to look at life with the glass half full kind of scenario as they go into marketing, and people tend to do that. So I think when you're looking at any promotional activities, you want to understand exactly how it's going to make your brand look. So if you're hiring, outside of your normal channels, like you might be using a celebrity, so you can't really tell a celebrity what to do. So you need to make sure that you coach them on your brand, and you educate them as to why it is that you're having them involved and what it is you hope to achieve. And I think if you do that, then you tend to mitigate things that could go wrong. But there's always the chance that somebody's going to say something that you in your worst, day would never say, would never think to say about your brand, but they just don't understand that. So I think when that happens, or if that was to happen, you just kind of roll into it, and you kind of explain your core message again. You explain why maybe that person didn't understand and why they took that counter point of view. And you make, it's a classic case of making lemonade from lemons, because when something is broken, then it's not getting fixed again, So you need to make sure your audience understands that you understand that that wasn't the intention, and that you move it forward from there and start climbing again, because you never know what's going to happen, and you just need to be able to articulate quickly. And it just goes back to, most marketing goes back to this, that nothing is new again. Everything is just based on the old. So it's how you deal with something when something bad happens. People judge you on your response. They tend to forget in 24-hour cycles or whatever what the bad thing actually was, and they're just concentrating on what you're saying right now. So always remember that you're always in the promotional cycle, even if something bad has happened.
Right.
So take the focus off that bad thing and move towards to your core message.
Yeah. So thinking about the worst that could happen is almost preparing for, if and probably when something will go wrong and how you're going to respond. I think that's great advice for anyone. The next one, Fergus, is thinking about the guest point of view. So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but tell us a little bit about why this question is important. What's the guest's point of view for the event or the experience that you're creating?
Yeah, I think this is the most important thing, because really it's experience, right? So you want to make sure that people have the proper experience that you're aiming to give them, but it needs to be on their terms. So really, you need to meet your audience on their terms and provide what it is they would expect you to provide. And if you don't do that, then what that first off tells your audience is that you don't understand them. And then it begins to seed that question in their mind. Well, if you don't understand me, then why should I purchase your product, advocate for your product, that type of thing. So I often remember doing an event for Oprah Winfrey, and she was doing a family day event for all of her media properties, and she came on site to look at what we had set up for the event, and it turned out that most of her audience were working mothers, and they actually needed certain things on site because they were coming not just on their own, but with their kids, sometimes new babies in tow as well. So you needed to provide mothers' rooms for those, which we did not have on site. And Oprah Winfrey is a very detail-oriented person. And she said, well, we can't do this event and have all these working mothers, 2,000 of them coming to talk to me, and then I don't provide the facilities that they need. And she was very, very opinionated about that, because she is connecting directly with working mothers. She's not a mother herself. And she wants to make sure that they 100% understand that she understands them. So I think really putting yourself in the journey path of your guest and your attendee is fundamentally the most important beginning step that you can take in planning any experience or programming any promotion.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal example there, Fergus. So the last two here, the next one we wanted to touch on is, do I need to push back with purpose? Tell us a little bit, unpack that question as you're leading towards the experience that you're designing for your brand. What is this about, pushing back with purpose?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we encourage everybody who works at AgencyEA in, the creative space with clients when they're planning things for clients to do. Instead of being just a pure kind of a yes man, yes woman type response to your client where they say, I have an idea, let's do this. Let's have you two play in, the middle of the Times Square in New York, because that would be great. You need to really push back and say, hey, does that really, really resonate with your brand? Because, at the end of the day, most things, I guess, are vanilla. They don't really matter. You can do certain things in life and nobody really notices. But if you do something that's very marked and is going to attract public attention, media attention, then the first thing you need to do is do the right thing. Because if you're not doing the right thing, then people they're not going to focus on what you did. They're going to say, why did, Discover Card decide that it was a great idea to put, I'm trying to think of a good example here that would be resonant for everybody's minds. So if you have, if you think back to the one percenters in DC and all people, taking over parks in DC and just camping out and really, really railing against, oppression and, not having balance in our society. If a bank was then to say, let's do a concert for our customers in the park adjacent to that park, then they may think that's a great idea. But if you don't provide them context for why that is such a bad public relations object, why that will not go down well, why they will get savaged in the press for that, and you just allow them to go ahead and do that, then you're not doing your job, because basically what will happen will be the worst thing. They will get caught by the media, and then they'll look at you and say, why didn't you tell me that? So you really, really must push back with purpose, because you need to be the best consultant that your client can take advice from in order to add value to your client conversations. And if you don't do that, then why would your client talk to you again? They really wouldn't, and they shouldn't, So giving them the best advice possible, I think, is always the way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key there is pushing back with purpose. Like you said, pushing back with the forethought that you're thinking through. What are the logical next steps? If we do this, how will that be interpreted? What will the effects be? Those sorts of things. And bringing your experience to bear in that conversation, I think is great as people are trying to think through, their own events or experiences that they're trying to design, or those for their clients.
All right, today's growth story is about search engine marketing. Clear Company is an HR tech company that was doing a lot of things right. Their messaging was clear, their product produced incredible results, but they were struggling to drive qualified traffic to their website. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first 12 months of working with Directive, Clear Company was able to increase their qualified lead volume by 157%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
So the last one, Fergus, you wanted to touch on is, what's the right brand balance? Unpack that one for us.
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to look at this. You have two different areas where we tend to do work. And the first one is B2B, so that's business to business. And then the second one is B2C, so business to consumer. So the business to business space is, I think, really, it's very important that if you're doing internal employee events, so it might be a general manager's conference, and you have their attention for 3 days. So the tendency for most planners there is to say, let's get them up at 8 o'clock, let's program them through 9 o'clock at night and get them back up at 8 o'clock again. And, let's throw in a yoga class at 6 o'clock in the morning for people that are really up and ready to do that. So to really over-program people. And what we hear more and more is that people just cry out for times to actually naturally get together, to maybe use that cliche to network and to actually do things on their own terms. So I think it's more vogue now to provide, a backdrop in a conference for people to do things on their own terms, to have, you hear this whole thing that we get very deeply involved in is, can we do 4 conference tracks within one conference so that people can come there and they can actually find their own journey path, and it's not prescribed at all to them. So it's very ad hoc as to what you will do. So if you and I, Logan, went to a conference, we could go to the same location but have completely different experiences.
Right.
So I think to avoid the tendency to overprogram in B2B is really, really key. And then I think in B2C, the same thing can happen. If you're the brand that's just throwing your product at people at every musical festival that happens between May and the end of September in any given year,
right,
then what happens is people no longer see your product by July because they're just so used to getting a free bottle of water or whatever it is, they become desensitized to it. So, trying to get in every channel is not in your interest, but getting into those same musical festivals and maybe positioning your product as a placement in the VIP lounge where a celebrity is just photographed drinking your bottle of water is maybe a slightly more expensive entry point, but gives you much, much more coverage of meaningful nature as an end result. So just being really careful that you don't go for more being more when actually thinking things out is much more, I think, acceptable to people as they receive your promotion, being in the B2B or B2C space.
Yeah, I think the point you make there in the B2B space, especially, as I think back on the conferences I attended in the marketing space in 2018 and the ones that we're planning on attending this year, I really appreciate, when there's opportunity to connect to the side with other people. Because oftentimes, I go to events for the content, but more so, I want to connect with other people. I want to have good conversations. Sometimes we're recording podcast interviews off to the side. And so thinking about how are you going to help people facilitate those side conversations, networking, whatever you want to call it, at your event, especially in B2B, I think that's great advice because you're giving people the value that they see in the event. It's not all about your product. And that value is still going to be tied back to you. When I think of great conversations I had in August of last year at the Flip My Funnel conference, I still think of the folks at Terminus that put on that event, even though, those conversations had nothing to do with their product offering. They put it on and they created the opportunity for me to connect with other smart marketers. So I think in what you said there is probably one of the best piece of advice for B2B marketers as they think about the experiences and the events that they're planning here in the rest of 2019. Well, Fergus, this has been a great conversation. Obviously, your team has done some great work and has great experience in creating experiences and events for brands. If anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you, ask any follow-up questions, or learn more about AgencyEA, what's the best way for them to find you guys?
Yeah, I think the best way to get us is www.AgencyEA.com. And then another way to get us would be Joanna Badamo, who's one of our very, very talented associate strategy directors at the agency. She did a big piece on exactly what we were talking about in Adweek. So you can find that there and reach out to Joanna on her email as well, which is quoted in that article. So that would be a really good way of staying in touch if you get questions directly on this topic. But AgencyEA.com, and you can get us there and sign up for our Creative Fuel newsletter, and we'll keep you in touch with things in the experiential world.
Awesome. Well, Fergus, this has been a great conversation. Thank you again for being on the show today.
Thanks, Lucas. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.